Hey guys, welcome back to the PFN Dallas Cowboys podcast. I'm Jess Nevarez. I am solo dolo today as Dalton Miller and his wife did welcome their baby into the world a couple weeks ago. So we're giving Dalton a couple weeks off to enjoy his family. And so speaking of which, I hope you all had a great holiday weekend and you all got to enjoy some family time as well. That's why I'm not in my usual setup. I am back home. And in case you haven't noticed, my mom is a teacher. And so, there's a lot going on behind me. So if you're watching this, excuse all of that that is going on behind me. If you're listening, well, just ignore that last part. But we are here to talk about all things Dallas Cowboys. And unfortunately, I wish I was talking to you on a Victory Tuesday. That is not the case. In fact, this is the first time the Dallas Cowboys have lost consecutive games back to back so far this season. So, yes, the Dallas Cowboys falling short to the Miami Dolphins, not a way that anybody wanted to spend their Christmas Eve at 22-20, your final score for the Dallas Cowboys there. And of course, very disappointing loss, a very last second loss. And I kind of wanted to go through today with you guys to dispel kind of what the issues were exactly and why the Cowboys can't seem to win at home. Keep in mind, the Cowboys have played 8 road games so far this season. They've lost 5, meaning they've only won 3. So what is going on? What is the issue here? And specifically with this Miami team. And so this was a game that going into, you knew was going to be a fast-paced game for the Dallas Cowboys. And I think when you look back at this game, you kind of see it was doomed from the start. And I'm talking about that very first drive the Cowboys had all the way down the field. They fumbled the ball at the 1-yard line, which you thought it was Hunter Lipke going in, but then you go back and you look, and it doesn't look like Hunter actually had possession of the ball. So that fumble does go towards Dak Prescott. The fumble on the 1-yard line, and then that kind of just laid out the recipe for disaster, if you will, throughout the game. And yes, they fought hard. And it's just such a frustrating loss to look at. So let's go over some offensive stats. We'll switch to defense here in a second. But the Cowboys had 97 total rushing yards in this game. Tony Pollard had 38 of those yards. Dak Prescott had 25. CeeDee Lamb had 14, Brandon Cooks had 9, and then Rico Dowdle had 4. So it's a bit of an interesting distribution there as far as the rushing attack went. And honestly, I expected to see a little bit more of a rushing attack, especially because rain started to become a factor throughout the game. Christy Scales was talking about, she's a Dallas Cowboys sideline reporter for the Dallas Cowboys radio network. She was talking about how off and on the rain was during this game. And this was a game going into had 0% chance of precipitation. Precipitation? Guys, I don't even know how to say that word. 0% chance of rain, pretty much. So it wasn't supposed to be a rain game. However, game at Hard Rock Stadium, you know how Florida weather is. And anytime the Cowboys do have an away game that is going to be outside, they practice wet ball drills anyways. But regardless, this weather wasn't supposed to be a factor in this game, and it was. So again, going back to that whole point, I was really surprised to see that the Cowboys didn't even hit 100 rushing yards in this game. As for Dak Prescott, he was 20 for 32, a 62.5 completion percentage, 253 passing yards, and let's see, 2 touchdowns there as well, no interceptions. Looking at this receiving corps, CD had 118 yards, which we'll talk about there. Jalen Tolbert had 51 yards, and then Jake Ferguson had 45. Brandon Cooks only having 14 receiving yards in this game. And so it's very interesting when looking back and kind of reflecting on this game, being a little bit nitpicky of the play calling and kind of going through the what if scenarios to get the Cowboys this win. One of the most interesting things that was brought up and noticed right away was CeeDee Lamb had a productive first quarter. I mean, it was so interesting. I was going back and I was reading tweets from the Cowboys PR Twitter, if you will, or X, whatever you want to call it. And in the first quarter alone, let's see, I'm looking for it right now. It says CeeDee Lamb reeled in 4 receptions for 93 yards in the first quarter, the 7th most receiving yards in the first quarter in franchise history. So the last player to hold this record was Des Bryant in 2014. So again, a very productive first quarter, which you want to see out the gates. You want to see that passing threat really getting at it with CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott. However, he kind of became a ghost, if you will, the second quarter, and then even the third quarter, getting a little bit more involved in the fourth quarter. But overall, it's not consistent enough that it's just not what you want to see from Mike McCarthy's play calling, especially when you're talking about your first wide receiver. Wide receiver one should have more involvement in that second quarter, especially after he got you a touchdown in that first quarter, and then that third quarter coming out of halftime at that point. But very interesting there. So CD was actually asked about this after the game, and he said, "Yeah, it was weird." And he said, "If you're going to get me involved, just keep me involved." And I understand his frustration. I mean, it gave very similar vibes to post 49ers game in week 5 when he said, "Get me the ball." It just gave very similar vibes. So clearly he was frustrated. He also expressed his frustration for the team not being able to win on the road. And he said, this narrative surrounding us not being able to win on the road, it's weird, but it's not wrong. And so getting him more involved would be ideal for this Cowboys offense as well. But overall, I mean, just it's worrisome as you go into the last 2 weeks of the season. Not that I don't want to say that these games don't matter, because they absolutely do. The Cowboys need to kind of use these next couple of games to boost their confidence back. But overall, what I find so interesting is it's ironic that your Cowboys are now going to have to be on the road, more than likely. But I mean, there's just less and less of a chance with every loss that they've had that they could get a home game advantage for any postseason play at this point. But they're going to have to play on the road in postseason. And they only have one more road game left, and that's in week 18 against the Commanders. And so the Dolphins, like we had talked about a couple weeks ago, Dalton and I on this podcast, was the Dolphins are really your last major, major battle that you could have won to kind of gain that confidence on the road. And so it's a shame that the Cowboys couldn't come out with that win, because they really needed that confidence for this game. Overall, though, it's going to be interesting to see how Mike McCarthy kind of adjusts his play calling, if he gets CeeDee Lamb a little bit more involved, if he doesn't. And then Brandon Cooks, I just think when you're talking about such a speedy guy, he should have so many more receiving yards and opportunities in a game like this. He only had 2 targets and 2 receptions. Obviously, he had the touchdown as well, but 14 yards in this game, I don't understand. And so what's frustrating about this team not being able to win on the road, and excuse me, I'm so stuffy. My allergies have been crazy. So if you're hearing me be a little stuffy, I'm so sorry. But what's interesting about this team not being able to win on the road is you sit and you kind of compare all of the factors that go into it. And interestingly enough, the 3 common denominators on it, I wrote an article about it this week, is one, you don't get your run game going. So say the passing game is getting neutralized. You have a CeeDee Lamb that you can't really get to because Jalen Ramsey's covering him in the second and third quarter, apparently, so much that he's not really becoming a factor at that point. Can't really lean on that run. And so that was one of the I guess recurring issues I've noticed in all 5 of the Cowboys losses is in these losses, every single one so far this season, the Cowboys have less than 100 rushing yards. And so anytime the Cowboys can establish more of a run threat, it just helps them out a little bit. And so I was a little sad. Well, bittersweet, because I was very excited to see Hunter Lipke getting a little bit more involved in this rushing game and involved in this rushing threat, if you will, because it's something that we've been waiting to see during training camp, during mini camp. I remember seeing some special packages with him in it, and I was really excited to see it. Because he can be just such a threat. Having a fullback on this team can be such a threat, especially when you're talking about the versatility aspect that he brings, not only in being able to block his tail off, which he's done all season, but I'm also talking in terms of being a rushing attack. And so finally getting to see some of those special packages from Mike McCarthy utilizing Hunter Lipke was nice, but then the fumble obviously wasn't so nice. And so interesting to see how they're going to kind of bounce back from that. But like I said, that was one contributing factor in all 5 of their losses. The second one is, guess what I'm going to say? Penalties, self-inflicted wounds for this Dallas Cowboys team. They are now second in the league, second most penalized team, just behind the Jets. And that's just not good company you really want to keep. It's so frustrating because I think especially as you get a little bit closer to playoff time, it becomes more and more of a wound that you have to really talk about, because that was one of the downfalls that got the Cowboys out of the playoffs last year against the 49ers. And so when you're talking about not being able to win on the road and these self-inflicted wounds just continuing to come up, it doesn't put a good taste in your mouth going into the postseason, and the postseason being only 2 weeks away, or the regular season being over in 2 weeks, that is. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how that's addressed. And I guess my biggest question is, can it be addressed this late in the season? And players have been asked about that. Coaches were asked about that even last week, preparing for this game, because it was obviously a point of attention against the Bills as well. And pretty much the answer we got was going back to fundamentals. That was something that Dan Quinn had said in terms of this game, was he was going to go back to the fundamentals of football, to ensure that these things aren't happening. So yeah, penalties, self-inflicted wounds just continue to kind of plague this Dallas Cowboys team, which is very, very frustrating, because it's been a process. I believe the Cowboys were in the top 5 most penalized teams last season by the time it came to an end. And so to continue to see that be such a reoccurring issue and a nagging issue, not something you want to see. And last but very not least, all 5 of these losses, what they have in common, lack of turnovers and lack of generating turnovers from the Cowboys defense. And it's so interesting to kind of just look at how these stats play out, right? Because as we always talk about on this podcast, and I always tweet about how, stats don't mean everything and all of that. But when it's just a glaring issue in your face that, the Cowboys defense can't create turnovers in these big games, and especially on the road when you don't have the home field advantage. And yes, Cowboys fans travel well, and they travel better than most fan bases. So pretty much wherever you go, you're going to have that fan base that is loud. But it's so interesting that they're not able to create turnovers in these situations on the road. So interested to see kind of how Dan Quinn gets that mojo back, if you will. I'm not sure if they just found good tape. They're kind of starting to figure out his scheme a little bit more. I'm not sure what's going on, but yeah, turnovers just have not been a factor. This back-to-back weeks, you have a Cowboys loss, but it's also back-to-back weeks that the Cowboys haven't generated turnovers from opposing offenses. And there's been opportunity, and it doesn't even have to come in the form of an interception or a pick six or anything like that. But fumbles, forced fumbles, fumble recoveries, things like that just really are not happening for this Cowboys defense. So I'm interested to see kind of how Dan Quinn addresses that going forward, if he adjusts his scheme a little bit. Because again, I really think it's vital for these next couple of weeks to be more focused on how they bounce back and what lessons they're taking from these back-to-back losses. Because again, you don't have a long time to build confidence back at this point. Playoffs are right around the corner, and they're lingering, right? I think what's so worrisome right now is you're going into the postseason, kind of with this monkey on your back, not being able to feel confident winning on the road. And I think at this point, it is getting in their head a little bit. So although we're not getting we're not getting answers when we're asking the question of, hey, what is the problem on the road? What's going on? Why is this such a reoccurring issue? Nobody really has answers. And it's frustrating talking to the guys in the locker room, because they want answers as well, right? Coaches obviously want answers for this as well. It's just, it doesn't make sense that there's such a drop off in how much production this team looks. I mean, they look like 2 totally different teams on the road and then at home as well. So talking at home, they average about 40 points at AT&T Stadium, and then on the road about 20, if that. That's just such a vast difference. And so it's interesting because yes, AT&T Stadium, obviously you get that home field advantage, but you can't always rely on that, especially going into the postseason when that's coming up here very soon. So going to be interesting, I should say, to see how the Cowboys will bounce back from this loss. And so now that we're talking about defense, let's kind of switch gears a little bit, going to the defense there. There were quarterback hits. So there was pressure on Tua throughout this game. Micah Parsons had 3 quarterback hits. Dorrance Armstrong, Osa Odigizua, both Dorrance and Micah had half a sack credited to them. And I mean, tackles for losses. And so if you want a silver lining, and I know it's kind of getting hard to find silver linings, especially when you're coming off of back-to-back weeks with these kind of losses from the Cowboys and frustrating losses at that. Silver lining is that last week against the Bills, one of the biggest downfalls that this Cowboys defense had was tackling. And that was something that they talked about all week at the Star, was really how the tackling was such an issue. And Dan Quinn talked about that. He said, that's not like us. We missed 12 tackles in this game against the Bills. That's a point of focus for us going forward. And then we talked about, again, the fundamentals that come into correcting something like that so late in the season. And so this week, to see all of the tackles for loss and how physical the guys were tackling in this game, it was an area of improvement. And again, there's no moral victories in a game like this, but at least it's not digressing in the areas that the Cowboys have been productive in, which, again, tackling for that Cowboys defense is definitely one of their strong suits, and it has been. So there's that. Going through Donovan Wilson, nice to see Dono on the climb again. He had 12 total combined tackles. Marquise Bell had 8. Damone Clark had 7, and then so did Micah Parsons. What's so interesting about this, I'm going to pull up these stats as well, is run defense was obviously a big question going into this game, considering the Bills ran all over the Cowboys defense. And again, tackling was a big contributing factor, according to Dan Quinn. The guys that talked in the locker room, a lot of the players said just came from their lack of being able to tackle. In this game, again, I know it's hard to find silver linings, especially when your last play of the game and your nail in the coffin was a run play on a 3rd and short there. So I know it's hard to find a silver lining. However, the Cowboys did contain the Dolphins' run, 91 rushing yards there. Not too shabby. But overall, again, it just went down to one play. And I think that's so interesting is after the game, Dak Prescott talked about, had there been a missed field goal, this would be a completely different conversation. And we would be talking about, kind of a win on our end. But there's just such a thin margin for error for this Cowboys team right now. And it's getting even thinner as the weeks go on and postseason kind of just creeps around the corner being so soon. So Cowboys defense overall, I think the biggest issue going back to not creating turnovers is just that. Eliminate the big plays, create turnovers, go back to what was working so well for you before when you were finding success there as well. And so, again, just very interested to see how this team bounces back. The Cowboys obviously face the Detroit Lions this coming Saturday. We have a Saturday game this week, so you all make sure to mark your calendars. I keep forgetting that it's a Saturday game this week as well, and so I had to put the reminder in my phone. But yes, a Saturday game for the Dallas Cowboys, who are going to take on the Lions. And, what's so interesting about this game is before the back-to-back losses, this was a game that everybody, this game and then the Commanders game, everybody kind of looked at and said, oh, maybe they won't even start the starters at that point. Let's kind of see what happens. They just have to win out. It's going to be real easy. But now, facing the adversity that they faced the last couple of weeks, it really makes you wonder what kind of Cowboys team you're going to see at home. And for me personally, all eyes are going to be on, hey, is this a team that is struggling to win, period? Or is this a team that's just struggling to win on the road? Either way, not a good situation. However, I'm interested to see how they bounce back in the form of, can they still win at home as well? And so I'm going to continue to kind of hone in this week, being at the Star and talking to the guys, kind of seeing how they are gauging their confidence. I think this is going to be a game of confidence for the Cowboys and kind of their last practice round, if you will, one of their last practice rounds before it really matters and before the Cowboys have a lot to dispel as far as how far people think that they can get in the playoffs. And so There's a lot of questions. There's more questions than answers right now for this team going into this Lions game, but overall, they need a win. Three consecutive losses would just be absolutely deflating, especially right before the postseason. So, interested to see how this team bounces back there as well. This is also the Jimmy Johnson Ring of Honor game, in case you forgot. Yes, that is still happening. So, the curse will officially be broken. This will be the game where you get to see Jimmy's name officially in the Cowboys Ring of Honor. So that will be very exciting there as well. Last but certainly not least, looking ahead, like I said, to the playoff picture for the Dallas Cowboys now, just became a little more difficult, especially with an Eagles win, which again was no shocker considering they beat the Giants. But with the Eagles win, kind of just makes things a little bit more difficult and gives you less of a chance to, one, take over the NFC East overall, two, makes it extremely, extremely unlikely to kind of take over that top seed in the NFC. So even if the Cowboys win for the remainder of the season and they win out both of these next two games, it's just very unlikely that will really it's obviously going to help them confidence wise, but as far as playoff contention and which they already have, but playoff seeding, I should say, it doesn't really help them much. It really, more than anything, just helps them rebuild kind of the confidence and I think the trust that they've lost within themselves um, in these next couple of weeks. So that's really what these next two games will be for, more than fighting for higher seeding. At this point, it kind of just looks like the Cowboys are taking that number 5 seed, especially because we had talked about this, Dalton and I, a couple weeks ago. Just the Eagles have such an easy schedule going forward. They play the Giants one more time. It's just not likely that they're going to lose the next two games going forward. It could happen, and if it did, that'd be fantastic. It's just not likely to happen. So as far as your playoff contention or seeding, I should say, I keep saying contention, playoff seeding for your Dallas Cowboys, it just doesn't look likely that they're going to take any other spot other than that 5 spot because it's out of their hands at this point. Especially with the loss to the Bills and then your back-to-back losses, Bills and then Dolphins, you just kind of put the nail in the coffin overall for higher seeding hopes and any home field advantage hopes at that point as well. So it's a bummer, obviously, because you always want that home field advantage, especially with the narrative surrounding the Cowboys being at home right now. But overall, they're going to the postseason regardless what happens these next 2 weeks. It's just like I said, the adversity that they're facing and how they bounce back is kind of what I'm keeping an eye on. How Mike McCarthy maybe gets CD more involved more consistently throughout the game. If this run game is really peaked at this point, if this is really all you're going to see from Tony Pollard and Rico Dowdle, and the ball distribution, I think, is just so interesting. And yes, you have to go for favorable matchups and all that game to game, but I'm interested to see kind of what the play calling looks like these next couple of weeks, or if Mike just shows his hand a little bit more come postseason, and you kind of see a little bit less at that point. So the strategy going forward will be interesting on the offensive side of the ball. As for the defense, what I want to see, turnovers. I want to see this defense go back to what their strong suit was. That was being aggressive, forcing turnovers, generating turnovers, forced fumbles, fumble recoveries. I really, really, really want to see that again for the form of, or for the sake, I should say, of gaining confidence and just making sure that they're ready for that postseason because, again, the NFC is still kind of down to the wire, so you don't really know who you're going to play in that first round. But regardless, it's going to be on the road. Makes you a little worried, but we'll take it 1 week at a time, friends, because that's really all we can do at this point is take it 1 week at a time. And this week, Cowboys have to focus on the Lions, gaining their confidence back, winning at home, and kind of finding their footing in what works for them again. So let's continue to see what they do. Overall, But I will be at the Star this week, again, making sure you have the best coverage, and talking to the guys after this loss, seeing how they feel, feeling out the room, asking questions to Mike McCarthy. I don't think we get coordinator availability, so won't be able to talk to John Fossil, Dan Quinn, or Brian Schottenheimer this week, but definitely continue to follow along. You can follow me at Jess Nevarez _ on Twitter throughout the week so you can stay updated with everything and injury report. Of course, I'll keep you updated on the latest from Tyron Smith, who missed this game with his back issue. Um, Keep you up to date on that, how much longer he's expected to miss, if any time, on Zach Martin, who is also dealing with an injury that left him questionable before this game against the Dolphins. So keep you updated, latest injury report, news, all that good stuff. Make sure to go follow me and go congratulate Dalton Miller, if you haven't already, and his wife for their beautiful new little addition to their family. Dalton will be back with me soon, so you don't have to hear me ranting for 25 minutes, hopefully next time. But if so, thank you so, so much for listening. We appreciate you so much. Make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a nice and sweet review wherever you listen to your podcast, because we just really appreciate it. And we really enjoy doing it. So I hope you guys enjoy doing it too, or enjoy listening to it with us as well. But I would really appreciate it if you would go leave us a review. That'd be amazing. And leave nice comments. Be nice to each other in the comments. I see y'all. But anyways, getting off topic, I hope you guys had an incredible weekend with your families. If you got to enjoy family time, loved one time, friend time, if you didn't, I hope you got to relax. And again, I'm so sorry. I wish I was talking to you on a Victory Tuesday and that we could have a little bit more of a fun discussion that's not so anxiety inducing and worrisome. But hopefully next week we'll be talking on a Victory Monday or Tuesday post Lions game, and we can talk all about how that goes. Until then, thank you guys so much for listening. Really appreciate the heck out of you each and every week. Stay tuned for next week's episode. We'll talk then. Have a great rest of your day. Bye, guys.